Fiske.
Fiske house,
Yeah. Well, that was built, there's a sign on it, and I think I'm right, 1779. At the same time, the house at number 10 Worthing Street, which is up for sale, I think now, and the one at 16 Westford Street sits back on the hill. They were all built the same year, and each one tried to outdo the other. In fact, two of them almost went bankrupt doing that. But the Fiske house later served as a tavern, and now I guess the bank still, the Fiske family lived there. They were, Mr. Fiske was a cousin, third or fourth cousin of mine, but they were descended from Reverend John Fiske, the first minister here in 1655, and also from Ebenezer Bridge, who was a minister at the time of the Revolution, the guy that refused to, got refused for prayers before they went to Concord. About all I know about the Fiske house.
Wilson Block Hotel.
The Wilson Block Hotel. Well, before the mid-1800s, there had been a little store there run by Samuel S. Parkhurst, a brother of my great-grandfather, and he moved it over to just about where the town hall is and set it up there. And incidentally, that when he set it there, I think it was a fire, but it stayed there. We have pictures of Parkhurst's store there. And then it was moved, when the railroad came through, it was moved down to Erickson's Corner, where Erickson's store is, and served as Parkhurst's store there. And when the railroad came through, they they took land. I know they put railroad tracks on part of the town land. In fact, the town hall over here was sitting, one corner of it was sitting on railroad land. But the block was built then in the 1860s, I think, and it was a hotel. And it's hard to believe that people came to Chelmsford as a summer resort, but there were several families. Tim Adams, up where the municipal office building is now, had guests. You read in the paper who came, lots of times just from Lowell. And there were several families had guests for the summer. Others came out, and during the winter they'd have sleigh rides from Lowell, would end up at the hotel. In the summer they'd have a hay ride that'd end up there. And it was a real hotel. They had a restaurant, an ice cream parlor there. And the stores underneath it, within my memory, which goes back to 1918 there, the far end of the building in the basement was a Chinese laundry. And I used to go by there with my mother, and I was scared stiff of this Oriental. I'd run, hang on my mother's hands. Next was the was Sweetzer's Market, which was there for many years until Mr. Sweetser, who was town treasurer for many years, put in the Sweetser building on Chelmsford Street. And then up here was this end was Falls and Birkinshaw's drugstore. That was the grandfather of Dickie Birkinshaw, the undertaker up here, and Walter D. Falls. He stayed on there and later moved down to where the Fleet Bank is now, on the left, faced the building, the left-hand side, Falls Drugstore. I knew him very well, because when I was in the 7th grade, I got interested in chemistry, had a chemistry set, and I'd talk for hours with him, and he'd give me or sell me sal ammoniac to make a battery and chemical things like that. But in more recent years, it's just been an apartment house.
Okay, Schoolhouse.
Which?
Schoolhouse.
1802?
Right.
The 1802 schoolhouse, a little brick one in the corner of the cemetery, was built on the site of Chelmsford Center's first school. There were 6 or 8, maybe 9. One of them on School Street in Lowell. That was Chelmsford in those days. And about 1795, 97 were built. But that apparently fell down or was torn down, and the 1802 schoolhouse was put up by subscription. The town didn't do it. And it served as the school you went from there to Harvard University, or a little later on, I think it was 1925, Chelmsford Classical School started where the Baptist parsonage is, and it only ran a short time. I have a report card for, I think it's 1828, my great-grandmother going there to school. And the 1802 schoolhouse continued till 1851, when the so-called yellow schoolhouse was built where the fire station is. Of course, it was refurbished in connection with the bicentennial. I was chairman, had a lot to do with that. Dick Lehue donated an awful lot of labor. I think the whole school cost him like $500 originally, and he donated several $1,000, and he put in new windows, and we had a rededication in '75 when Mrs. Howe, the mayoress of Chelmsford, England, was over here. And then it was used as the hearse house. They took out the door and put in a wide door so you could get the town hearse. In fact, I think we had 2 of them. And that was used, called the hearse house. We have pictures of that when I was in school. Then later on, it became a garage and tool house for the cemetery department. The Historical Society was formed in 1930, and they used the upstairs and the reference section of the Adams Library for a couple of years. Then the library wanted the space, so all of that stuff was moved over to the 1802 schoolhouse, the cemetery department having moved out, and just stored there until they bought the Barrett Byam house and moved things up there. As I say, in 1975, we closed in the door. Had quite a job finding bricks that matched the old bricks. The 2 windows on the front had been bricked up, so we opened those up, put those in. Dick put in all new window frames, and we had it furnished as much as possible like the school would, with a bench desk. And then one of the teachers' desks is a desk that when the teachers had at the West Chelmsford School, I think, way back. And since then, it's been used as headquarters for the Historical Commission and the Historic District Commission. They have meetings there. Now, we haven't said anything about the Tollhouse, have we?
Right.
The Tollhouse was built about 1837 and stood near or on Hadley Park in Lowell at Middlesex Village. See, Middlesex Village was Chelmsford until 1878 or 79, when Lowell took it over. Lowell separated from Chelmsford in 1826 and became downtown Lowell. But the house had been stored in Lowell by Judge Hadley, who owned it and was a descendant of people that were connected with it. And in 1955, his heirs, his sisters, I guess, presented to the town with the understanding that it would never leave the town, and it was put on the town hall lawn for the tercentenary celebration as sort of an information booth and a sales booth. After the celebration in '55, it was moved up back of the 1802 schoolhouse, directly in back of it, near it, and it sat there from 1955 until 1974-75, when we had it moved back onto the common, refurbished, painted up, and used as an information center for the bicentennial celebration. After the bicentennial celebration, it sat there for, I don't know, a month or so. Selectmen wanted to get rid of it, and there was great discussion where to put it, and it finally ended up that they would put it on the common. But that was the Tollhouse That was the toll house for the Middlesex Canal, the upper end of it. The Middlesex Canal ran from Chelmsford to Boston. You hear people say it ran from Lowell to Boston. It never went through Lowell because it was discontinued in the late 1850s, and Lowell didn't acquire any of that land until 1878, so Chelmsford then. And that was, of course, where they collected tolls on what is believed to be the first traction canal. That means canal boats pulled by horses on towpath. And when they built the Erie Canal, people came on to see that canal. It was really a first. It was not the first in Chelmsford, because in 1795, the Middlesex, the Pawtucket Canal was built in Lowell to bypass the falls. They couldn't bring logs down on rafts over the falls or the rapids. The falls hadn't been put in then, but there were rapids. They'd have to go ashore, unfasten the rafts of logs, haul them by ox team around back of what's now the Memorial Auditorium beyond the Concord River, and put them in the river again. So they built the Pawtucket Canal. That later became the foundation for the Lowell canal systems. The other working canals, power canals, drew water off Pawtucket Canal. But in recent years, just the last 2 or 3, it's been used as sort of an information booth here. And it was used to store chairs that the band used. And that's something I like to bring up, town band. Back, we have pictures back in around 1900, well maybe it was 1905, that show a permanent bandstand on the common, just this side of the monument. I don't know when that disappeared, but when I was in grammar school in the 20s, I was, as I say here, from 1920 through June of 26, there was a temporary stand here, bandstand. Actually, it was here most of the time, but they'd move it South Chelmsford for one band concert and west and all around. The Chelmsford Brass Band, under the direction of G. Thomas Parkhurst, Eleanor Parkhurst's father, played band concerts. The town appropriated $400 every year for band concerts, so they'd have band concerts here. Then in 1955, with the tercentenary coming along, Sergeant Basil Larkin of the police department organized the police band, the police auxiliary band. I guess it was the police band. And they gave concerts every week for a year or two. They had Basil had made up a trailer that he could tow behind his car that opened up into a bandstand, and that was located up the other side of the monument, the left of the monument. So that was another use for the common.
Can you describe the earliest, you already did a little bit about the booth and stuff, but can you describe a little bit more about the earliest 4th of July parade you remember?
Well, the first one that I personally remember was 1923, because I was involved in it. I was 9 years old. There hadn't been one since 1907, and there'd been impromptu parades. Some were just what you call horribles. We don't have those now much, but they're the comic section, and I always missed it. People like those the best, to see some of their neighbors dressed up foolish. But 1923, when the Girl Scouts and the Village Improvement Association had the celebration, it included several things besides the midway here, but the parade was led by Edward Robbins. Some of the older folks in town remember Margaret Mills, that was very active in town, with her father. And the night before the 4th, I was downtown with my mother shopping. As I say, I was 9 years old, and we met Ed Robbins, and he asked my mother if I could help him up with the parade. She said, sure. So next morning I reported to the railroad station, which was over where the filling station is on Littleton Road, at the beginning of Littleton Road, and he gave me a box of ribbons like an ambassador wears, and a little baton to carry. Those were to go to each of his aides, and I think there was something like 37 of them. And he wanted me to hand them out. He was busy. So I handed out quite a few, and then I had some left, and it was almost time for the parade to start. He was sitting on horseback, of course he and the aides are all on horseback, just on Littleton, or maybe in front of the railroad station, just off Littleton Road. And there was another horse on his left with a commando of troops from Fort Devens. The troops were going to march in the parade, so Mr. Robbins was conferring with the commander of the Army troops. Knowing nothing about horses, I had been given a buggy whip. Royce Parker gave me a buggy whip. He came down in a horse and buggy from South Chelmsford. He didn't normally travel that way, but because he was going to ride horseback in the parade, one of the aides, he came with a buggy. And he came over to me and he said, "If I leave this buggy whip in the buggy, someone will steal it. Will you hold it for me?" So I held it like this everywhere I went and let go of that buggy whip. And I wanted to ask Mr. Robbins if there were more people coming. I was worried. So I walked in between the two horses. The Army horse turned and saw the whip and shied, knocked me down. I remember one hoof coming down on one side and one on the other. I rolled over and over downhill toward the railroad track, and Mrs. Charles Dane was sitting in the touring car that was going to be the Unitarian Church float up on Littleton Road, and she came down and picked me up. I was scared stiff and afraid of horses ever since. But that parade started up at Byam's Corner, you know where that is. It's where Hunt Road comes off of Littleton Road, and came down Littleton Road through the square. I'm not sure where it ended. I had some friends, two friends that were in the horrible section, so-called. They were dressed up like firecrackers. They had red tubes with a big wick on top of them. But I remember quite a bit about that. Most of the floats were commercial floats from Chelmsford, the different grocery stores and the Pelham cider mill, people like that. And we have the picture, the movie of that. That's the VCR of the 23rd. The after the parade, they all went down to the trotting park, which is across the tracks from Chelmsford Mall, and that was a racetrack for trotters, and that's included in the film.
So was a horse racing like a tradition after 4th of July parade?
No, it went all summer, regular thing. I forgot, I've written a newspaper article on it. I've forgotten just what it said, but it was run by the Lowell Lowell Trotting Association. I always remembered that because my father tried to collect a water bill from them that was overdue 15 years or something. No, they had trotting races with sulkies there.
There's one thing which is quite close to common, and we haven't talked about the social library.
Well, the social library was started by Hezekiah Packard, who was, I'm not sure, the 4th or 5th, 6th minister at the church, and he was very much, I think he'd been an assistant librarian at Harvard or in Cambridge. So he started this, and it was a subscription library. You had to pay something like 50 cents a year, and the books were kept in the librarian's home. There wasn't any library building. He probably kept it. I've done an article, and I'm doing another one right now on his biography. But he built the house at 16 Westford Street, and the one in 1779 or something, up on the hill. So he may have had them there. But different people, as they would become librarian, would move them to their house. It continued. They finally moved it into the town hall. At one time, I believe it was in the church, because just inside of the door to the right was a coat room. It's been taken out now. It had books in shelves when I was a kid going to Sunday school in 1921. But got into the town hall about 1897, 98, I don't remember the exact date, as the Chelmsford Social Library. And then the town took it over as, I think, the Free Public Library. Shortly after that, Amos Francis Adams gave the building for the Adams Library, and J. Adams Bartlett, that lived number, 6? Bartlett Street, the first White House, gave the land. That was all part of the Adams farm, which had crossed over to the railroad tracks and way over the other way. And he gave the land, and his brother, Captain C.A. Bartlett, who lived at 15 Bartlett Street, paid for grading. Apparently there was a gravel bank there. And then I guess it was 98 that the library was open. I have my father a complete write-up, about 2 or 3 pages in the newspaper of the celebration. And that's all I know about.
But talking about the Old Town Hall,
Yeah.
which is called Old Town Hall right now, you also mentioned that when the railroad came through the common, you know, it became like a pottery railroad, like area. But when the railroad came through the common, actually,
When did the railroad come through? Well, we know it was after 1880, because that's when the town hall was built. About that time, I'm not sure. It was the old Colony line at first, and then it became New York, New Haven, and Hartford. And when parties were held, dances at the town hall, like on Thanksgiving, the Unitarian Church always ran almost a formal ball. I think I ran chairman of the last one in 1936, probably. Each church was allowed to use the town hall free of charge once a year. And when there were parties like that, or fairs, or entertainments, minstrel show and things, the railroad would send a special train out and wait till the party was over to take people back to Lowell. There was also on this line what was called the scoot train, and I had a close friend, my father's age, Ed Clark, collected pictures of locomotives, and he told me once, you know, I'd like to get a picture of that scoot train. I said, I'll show you one. So I loaned it to him, copied it off. He had 200 or 300 locomotives. He belonged to some organization that swapped them. And it used to come out just from Lowell to Chelmsford Center, let people out. Then it would continue up a little ways. And my father was working in Lowell and living at 67 High Street. So he would get into the cab and go up, get out and back of his house and up through the fields to the home, and they would come back on the siding up here and back on the main line, hook onto the cars, and they would back into Lowell. So it just ran from Chelmsford to Lowell, and as I say, I have a good picture of it. I can remember several things in connection with the railroad, but one is that you get a long freight coming from Lowell. It's uphill almost all the way from Lowell. Well, if they slowed down for any reason or stopped before they got to South Chelmsford, which is about the top of the hill, they couldn't start again. The wheels would spin, sometimes even with 2 locomotives. So they'd back to Lowell, put another locomotive on back to push, and then push up till they got in South Chelmsford, and then disconnect and go along. But I believe when the talk of abandoning the railroad, they said that the town hall was on some of the railroad land. And that was started in 79. And it's an old town hall because it's over 100 years old. But old implies that there's a newer one, and there is no newer one. Before this one was abandoned and the officers moved up to what had been the high school when I was there, I asked the selectmen, I said, I do a lot of writing, is the new building going to be called the town hall? He said, absolutely not. They were very adamant. That's the town office building, the municipal office building. This is still the town hall, the only one we ever had except the Church Vestry, and they had one in North Chelmsford, which is another story.
What was like first businesses opening around the common here? Like the first stores, or what kind of stores they have?
Well, I wasn't around those days, but there weren't any stores around the common. The Parkhurst store, where the hotel block is, was, I don't know, 1859, somewhere around there. That was open. They had a barber shop in there. They had a shoe shop, Mr. Cowdrew ran a shoe shop. Down the center of town in what's now the Fleet Bank building, that was Oddfellows Hall, built in about 1900. And they spent so long building it. The 4th of July parade had a float with cardboard model of the place and said, when are we going to see the hall? It had been 2 years they'd been working on it. That was Oddfellows Hall. Oddfellows Hall was on the 2nd floor where they met. It was later where St. Mary's Church was organized, and met there until they built the Spanish Mission Church in the 30s up here. It was also where wrestling matches were held. Miss Josephine Orkington had dancing classes there. But there was a bakery. When I was a kid, E.T. Adams had a grocery store.
And the first car dealership also.
The first car dealership in Chelmsford was in the basement of what we call the hotel block. That was Dan Hart and Roger Boyd. Hart and Boyd sold Chevrolets. And that was in the 30s. I graduated from MIT in 36 and went to work for DuPont that summer and next year, actually, first year. And I know I had my car repaired, so I know when that was there. The first, what do we call them, chain grocery store was the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, which was located down in Central Square, just the other side of the brook. I'm not sure what, I think is an upholsterer in there now. That was where the first one was. And then a couple of years later, First National Store opened where the Chelmsford Gift Shop is. Those were the first time we'd ever had chain stores. Before that, they were all individually owned. This S.S. Parkhurst moved over to the corner, became S.W. Parkhurst, his nephew. My grandfather was town clerk. He had his office there. He was also postmaster, so the post office was in there. And the Parkhursts ran it until, I don't know, Mr. Erickson took it over. He had worked for them. And then I spoke of E.T. Adams down where the bank is. That's where Mother traded for groceries. We lived almost in the center of town, so it was easy. But there were no stores right around here except that one over there. And when they moved down to the corner, that took the place of the tavern that had been there around, well, it was there in 1712, I know. It had burned years before. In fact, the trees on the little park there for years and years showed the effects of the fire. And when the second church, First Parish Church, was being built, people had their church meetings in the tavern. I know that was. Kidder's Garage was where this brick building is now, where East Coast Video is. That was built in, 23, I think it says so on it. I remember watching them build. They moved the house that was standing there, which we have pictures of, up Wilton Road. It's where the Kidder family lived for years.